On October the 3rd in the year 1943, at the Brown Shipbuilding Yard located in Houston, Texas, an extraordinary event took place at precisely 8 o'clock in the morning. It was at this early hour that the keel of a new destroyer escort vessel was laid down, marking the beginning of what would become a remarkable engineering and industrial achievement. In just under 90 days, exactly 89, the same ship, still in its infancy, would be launched into the water, ready to engage in the perilous task of hunting down Japanese submarines lurking beneath the vast Pacific waves. Soon after this announcement, the Japanese naval attaché stationed in Switzerland received this piece of intelligence. His initial reaction was skepticism. He dismissed the news as mere propaganda, a typical tactic in wartime misinformation. To him, it seemed impossible that a nation could construct a warship, particularly a destroyer escort, within such a short span of time. His own experience and the knowledge accumulated from the Japanese Navy's extensive shipbuilding efforts indicated that it usually took at least 18 months to build a single destroyer, from the initial laying of the keel to the vessel's commissioning. Commander Yamamoto, a seasoned officer well-versed in naval matters, had studied at the Imperial Naval Academy and had overseen construction at Yokosuka Naval Arsenal. He knew that building a contemporary warship demanded approximately 300,000 man-hours, employing highly skilled welders, master shipwrights, precise engineers, and craftsmen. Every rivet was placed by hand, and each steel plate meticulously shaped by artisans dedicated to their craft. This process, a symphony of precision and labor-intensive craftsmanship, was considered the only way to produce a vessel capable of withstanding the fierce demands of naval combat. Given this understanding, the Japanese officer found it hard to believe that Americans could achieve such rapid construction, only 3 months for a destroyer. However, the Americans had adopted an innovative approach. They were eschewing traditional riveting for welding techniques, significantly reducing construction time. Moreover, they weren't simply building ships in the conventional sense. Instead, they were assembling them in a manner akin to assembling toys, quickly, efficiently, and in large quantities. Before 1941, Brown Shipbuilding had never constructed any warships at all. Their main business had centered around fabricating oil rigs and large storage tanks. Yet, with the outbreak of war, the company had transformed rapidly into a warship manufacturer. Now, they were churning out destroyer escorts, 56 of them, all assembled on a vast, continuous production line. The first vessel in this series, designated Destroyer Escort No. 1, took approximately 306 days from the initial keel laying to launch. The 10th ship in the series was built faster, taking only about 180 days. By the 30th vessel, the production time had been reduced further to around 120 days. According to the plan, by the 50th vessel, the time from start to self-commissioning had been cut dramatically to approximately 89 days from the keel laying, an awe-inspiring feat for building a warship, a process traditionally requiring nearly 3 full months. Meanwhile, on the Pacific island of Saipan, Lieutenant Tanaka, a Japanese officer caught during the ongoing campaign, was interrogated. He refused to believe the astonishing numbers relayed by his captors about American shipbuilding speed. He dismissed their claims as exaggeration or misinformation. But the interrogator, confident and well-informed, chuckled and offered the facts in a calm, no-nonsense tone. "No, we launch one destroyer escort every 3 days." He explained that the United States, operating from a multitude of shipyards, no fewer than 19 across the country, had mastered a production method that allowed for such an aggressive schedule. When translated into monthly terms, this capability meant they could deploy roughly 10 destroyer escorts every single month. In stark contrast, Japan's total wartime production comprised only about 32 destroyer escorts, built over the course of the entire conflict. The American secret was a highly sophisticated assembly line process. Each warship was constructed in sections simultaneously, with different parts developed in parallel. For example, while the bow section was being assembled in Building No. 4, the stern section was already taking shape in Building No. 7, and the bridge was completed even before the keel of the ship was laid. Entire deckhouses, prefabricated in specialized rooms, were wired, painted, and then lifted into place atop the hull using powerful cranes. Building a modern American destroyer escort involved the dedication of approximately 3,000 workers, including master craftsmen, highly trained technicians, and skilled laborers. To put this into perspective, at the American shipyard, Boeing's Bethlehem Steel Division employed about 5,000 workers, but they were primarily engaged in manufacturing steel for other industries, like construction or the automotive sector, not in direct shipbuilding. Conversely, the American shipyards mobilized a diverse workforce comprising farmers, housewives, teenagers, and anyone capable of wielding a welding torch. Among them was Wendy, a young woman of just 18 years old, who had only 6 weeks earlier been working as a grocery clerk. Now, she welded sections of steel hulls for destroyer escorts, earning about $1.20 per hour, an income that, surprisingly, surpassed even the monthly salary of a Japanese naval officer. Wendy repeated the same welding seam tirelessly, 9 hours each day, working with simple yet crucial skills. She didn't need to understand the intricate mechanics of ships or the complex engineering behind their power systems. Her task was singular: to perform this one weld correctly every time. By February of 1944, the USS Samuel B. Roberts, a newly constructed destroyer escort, was launched from the facilities of Brown Shipbuilding. Remarkably, it took only 142 days, roughly 4.5 months, from the initial keel laying to its commissioning. In Japan, such a timeline would be unimaginable. Their shipbuilders would still be installing engines and completing systems long after the American vessel was already in service. The Americans had integrated every phase of construction, installing 4 diesel generators and 2 electric motors, creating a diesel-electric propulsion system far more complex than anything Japan could produce. This modular approach made installation simpler. Components were dropped into the hull, connected with just 4 cables, and the ship was ready to go. The engine units arrived on train cars from General Motors, the same factory that manufactured automobiles like Buicks. Now, that very factory produced large marine diesel engines capable of delivering around 12,000 horsepower, surpassing Japan's best destroyer, which had a power of only about 11,000 horsepower. These engines formed the core of what was essentially a fleet of disposable, mass-produced ships, escort vessels designed to be produced rapidly, used intensively, and replaced when worn out, epitomizing America's warship production philosophy during this period. The radar systems are delivered ready installed within their protective housings, ensuring they're immediately operational upon arrival. These early warning devices include the Surface Search Radar, which monitors maritime surface activity, and the Air Search Radar, designed to detect approaching aerial threats from afar. Japan's Navy possesses a limited number of these radars, roughly around 20 units distributed across its fleet, a relatively small fleet considering the scope of their naval operations. In contrast, the United States places its trust not only in land-based radar stations, but also integrates sophisticated radar systems directly onto destroyer escort ships that they deem replaceable or expendable within their strategic doctrine. A former Japanese engineer, speaking after the war, would reflect on the technological gap with a mixture of acknowledgement and disbelief. He stated, "We did not lack the ability to understand American radar technology," emphasizing that they comprehended the workings of the American systems. However, they couldn't reconcile their skepticism about the practicality of deploying such advanced electronics on vessels considered disposable. They believed that on ships deemed transient or sacrificial, advanced electronics would be wasted or simply not worthwhile. The Japanese assumed that the radar units captured or intercepted during wartime operations were false decoys meant to mislead. In their view, no nation would realistically invest such expensive and delicate electronics on ships that were little more than temporary escorts destined for high-risk encounters. The weapons provided to the Japanese Navy arrived in trucks: 3-inch guns, 8 40mm Bofors guns mounted at the bow, 10 20mm Oerlikon autocannons, and a single Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar system. The Hedgehog, an innovative and highly effective weapon, alone cost more than Japan's entire expenditure on an average coastal patrol boat. This piece of equipment fires a pattern of 24 small mortars ahead of the vessel, allowing for pattern bombing runs against submerged submarines without the need for precise aim, vastly improving the chances of a kill. Meanwhile, Japan's continued reliance on depth charges, dropped behind the ship in a blind, scattershot manner, shows their technological and tactical lag. These traditional weapons lack the precision and sophistication of the American Hedgehog. American anti-submarine warfare turns a complex hunt into a matter of precise mathematical calculations, coldly efficient and designed for maximum effectiveness. The total cost of constructing each American destroyer escort was estimated at approximately $6 million, an enormous investment considering Japan's limited industrial capacity. The Japanese couldn't accurately calculate the equivalent expenditure, primarily because they lacked the production lines necessary for manufacturing the cutting-edge radar systems, mechanical computers, and proximity fuses that made American escorts so formidable. Every Japanese vessel was individually crafted by hand, each unit unique and difficult to replace, further limiting their production capacity, a stark contrast to the American approach, which relied on mass production and assembly line efficiency. To put this into perspective, the USS Samuel B. Roberts represented the 413th vessel out of the 563 destroyer escorts planned by the United States Navy. Meanwhile, the Japanese submarine commander by the year 1943 had completed his 4-year training at the Naval Academy, preparing himself for the intense underwater battles ahead. On the 15th of February 1944, the American submarine USS Aspro successfully located and engaged him. The American sonar operator, meticulously trained for just 6 weeks, effectively tracked and targeted the Japanese vessel. The torpedo that ultimately sank the Japanese submarine UNUS 43 cost about $10,000, an eye-watering sum at the time, considering the Japanese submarine took 2 years to build. This stark reality highlights an unsettling truth that Japan refuses to fully accept. They are not merely fighting against the United States Navy's ships and weapons, but are engaged in an economic struggle where resources and industrial capacity count just as much as military tactics. The Americans' approach is not founded solely on martial prowess. Instead, it is rooted in a vast, highly developed industrial economy that supplies their armed forces with cutting-edge technology, mass-produced and reliable. Japan, on the other hand, operates within a different paradigm, where the war effort is hampered by limited industrial infrastructure, necessitating handcrafted, one-of-a-kind ships that are difficult to replicate or replace. In Washington, Admiral King reviews production reports with a measure of frustration. By October of 1943, only 8 destroyer escorts had been completed, far below expectations. Subsequent reports in November and December indicate incremental progress, but still fall short of the strategic goals. The Admiral had hoped for a monthly production rate of 15 escorts, but the reality proved disappointing. Conversely, in Tokyo, Admiral Toyota receives similar reports and feels a sense of relief that, despite slow progress, at least some ships are being completed. By October of 1943, Japan had finished 0 destroyers, and the subsequent months showed no better results, with no new escorts launched by November and December. By January of 1944, however, American shipyards had achieved a remarkable level of efficiency. The process had been optimized across multiple facilities, including the Mayer Island Naval Shipyard, Bethlehem Steel's plant in Hingham, Boston Navy Yard, and Tampa Marine, among other 19 shipbuilding sites. Each utilized the same blueprints, identical parts, and standardized methods, transforming the production of warships into an assembly line operation. This streamlined approach, akin to industrial warfare itself, allowed the United States to outproduce and outpace Japan's shipbuilding efforts significantly. Lieutenant Suzuki, a Japanese submarine commander, recorded his observations in his war diary, writing, "The Americans have fundamentally altered the nature of warfare through mathematics. They construct ships and submarines at a rate faster than we can sink them. The number? That's a mistake. What I should have said is that they build ships faster than we can even count them." This statement underscores the enormous industrial and technological gap that existed during the war. In March of 1944, the Japanese Navy analyzed the situation more thoroughly, noting that the United States had launched 73 destroyer escorts to Japan's meager loss of only 4 submarines sunk. According to their projections, if this rate continued, America would possess around 500 escort vessels by 1945, while Japan's underwater fleet would be almost entirely annihilated, with no submarines left to protect their ships. The Japanese analysis, however, proved overly optimistic. The reality was even grimmer. By April of 1944, Japanese submarine Ione 183 was detected by the USS Poggi. In a desperate attempt to escape, the submarine tried to slip away, but it was only a matter of time before American technology and tactics caught up with it. There is simply no chance of success for Japan's naval forces in the face of the overwhelming American industrial and military machinery. The radar on Poggi, a U.S. Navy vessel, precisely detects the approaching enemy submarine with perfect clarity, leaving no room for error. In response, the submarine is targeted with 4 torpedoes, all launched in rapid succession. The submarine Ione 183 is quickly struck and sinks utterly, taking all hands on board with it. No one survives this attack. The entire crew perishes within minutes, their lives extinguished in a swift and tragic event. This incident occurs in May of the year 1944, a pivotal period in the Pacific theater of World War II. Meanwhile, the USS England, a ship of the Buckley-class destroyer escort built at Bethlehem Steel's shipyard in San Francisco, is actively engaged in hunting down enemy submarines. Within just 12 days, this single vessel manages to sink no fewer than 6 Japanese submarines, each of which had taken Japan approximately 18 months to construct. These submarines, designated by their alphanumeric codes I-16, RO-106, RO-104, RO-116, RO-108, and RO-105, represented a significant portion of Japan's submarine fleet. In stark contrast, each of these submarines was part of Japan's long-term military planning, an effort spanning nearly 9 years to develop and build each vessel. The sinkings by the USS England, however, were accomplished in just 4 months, an astonishing demonstration of American industrial efficiency and military prowess. The 6th submarine, designated RO-105, in its desperate attempt to evade being destroyed by diving underwater, is too late. The American Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars are already in the air, unleashing their deadly pattern in a spray of 24 projectiles. The spread of these projectiles ensures a high probability of hitting the target, and 4 of the grenades make contact, causing the submarine to rupture and break in half. The crew on board RO-105 perishes within seconds, their lives ending in a matter of moments. Back on the USS England, the crew is already preparing to reload the Hedgehog launchers, their actions routine and mechanical, like the operations of any factory-assembled machine. Meanwhile, Admiral Toyota, a Japanese naval commander, receives the devastating report: 6 submarines lost, all within the reach of just a single escort vessel. Puzzled and alarmed, he asks his staff how many such escort ships they have available. His intelligence officer quickly checks and responds that, at present, they have approximately 200 escort vessels still operational. The admiral's face drains of color as he absorbs this staggering figure. He calculates that Japan's remaining submarine fleet numbers only about 58 vessels, significantly fewer than before. By June of 1944, the situation has grown even more dire for Japan. The American forces, particularly the United States Navy, are conducting relentless airstrikes over the Mariana Islands, inflicting heavy losses on Japanese aircraft. Around 400 planes are destroyed in this campaign. Yet, this loss, while severe, is not the most catastrophic blow. The true disaster lies in the relentless attrition of Japanese escort vessels, which are vital to protecting their submarines and other naval assets. These escort ships are the lifeline that saves countless downed American pilots, rescuing every single one of them without exception. The Japanese Navy is unable to replace these escort vessels quickly enough, while the United States can afford to do so easily. Consider the case of Lieutenant J.G. Bush, who was shot down over open water. The destroyer escort USS Herman swiftly picks him up within just 40 minutes. Remarkably, he is back flying combat missions again in only 3 days. The costs involved in his rescue are staggering. His aircraft alone had cost about $50,000, with his training amounting to an additional $100,000. The destroyer escort that rescued him, however, was valued at around $6 million, a substantial investment, but one that clearly paid off in lives saved and strategic advantage gained. The American military deems this expenditure worthwhile, as they can afford both to build ships and to train pilots extensively. Meanwhile, the Japanese pilot who managed to shoot Lieutenant Bush down faces a different fate. Running out of fuel while ditching his aircraft, he manages to land the plane in the water in a controlled manner. He survives this crash, but is left stranded, treading water for 3 days. Despite the Japanese Navy's efforts, no ship comes to rescue him because their fleet lacks enough ships to spare for pilot recovery. By the 4th day, he drowns, his 2 years of rigorous training entirely lost, a tragic consequence of Japan's inability to construct enough escort vessels to support such operations. July of 1944 marks a peak in production for the United States. During this month alone, approximately 15 destroyer escorts are officially commissioned and pressed into service. This means that every 2 days, a fully outfitted warship, ready for combat, joins the fleet. The pace of American shipbuilding is staggering. A new combat-ready vessel becomes operational every 48 hours, a testament to the immense industrial scale and organizational efficiency at work. In stark contrast, the shipyards owned by Henry Kaiser, though prolific, are producing different types of vessels, namely Liberty ships and cargo ships, not frontline warships. For example, the Liberty ship SS Robert E. Peary was launched in record time, just 4 days and 15 hours from the first cut of the keel to the launching ceremony. This rapid construction allowed the United States to produce a 10,000-ton cargo vessel in less than 5 days, a feat that Japan's shipbuilders could not even match when trying to construct a simple fishing boat. Captain Arita, Japan's most renowned submarine ace during the war, later reflected on these developments, stating that Japan realized its defeat when it saw the scale of American mass production. His words underscored the fact that American ships weren't necessarily prettier or more elegant. They were built quickly, simply, and in huge numbers. They were ugly, crude, mass-produced, he recounted. However, that was exactly the point. In war, beauty and elegance are secondary. What matters most are numbers and the ability to produce large quantities of war material rapidly. The United States, with its vast industrial capacity, possessed infinite numbers, making Japan's efforts futile. August of 1944 saw Japan launching its newest, most advanced destroyer, Shimakaze. This vessel was the product of nearly 2 years of meticulous construction and represented the pinnacle of Japanese naval engineering. It was equipped with 15 torpedo tubes and capable of speeds reaching 40 knots, making it a true masterpiece and a symbol of Japan's naval ambitions. Yet, despite its impressive specifications, the same month, the United States commissioned 12 new destroyer escorts. While these ships were slower, weaker, and arguably less elegant, there were now 12 of them, more than twice the number of Shimakaze commissioned in the same period. The following month, this number would double again, with another 12 destroyer escorts added to the fleet. Over the ensuing months, even the most formidable Japanese ships like Shimakaze proved vulnerable. Surrounded by a network of destroyer escorts, they could not reach enemy aircraft carriers parked beyond their reach. For example, Shimakaze would survive for only about 3 months, eventually being sunk by aircraft launched from American aircraft carriers that she could not engage because her escorts kept her at a distance, protecting her from enemy air attack. This relentless, overwhelming industrial and tactical superiority of the United States ultimately rendered Japan's most advanced ships ineffective, exposing the profound impact of American scale and production capacity on the outcome of the war. In the span of only a few days, countless ships, including dozens of destroyer escorts, were constructed, ready to be launched into the tumultuous waters of the Pacific Theater. This rapid buildup exemplified America's extraordinary industrial capacity during the war, allowing them to produce large quantities of highly specialized vessels in remarkably short periods. For example, within just 4 days, a single Liberty ship, designed to carry about 10,000 tons of cargo, could be assembled and ready to set sail. The filmmaker or narrator showing these scenes chuckles at the irony, dismissing it as mere propaganda, perhaps, But then his mood shifts upon witnessing footage of the destroyer escorts being launched into the water with perfect precision every 3 days. Each time, a new ship slides seamlessly into the ocean, a symbol of the relentless industrial rhythm that the United States had perfected during the war effort. The storyteller's smile fades as he recognizes the underlying technique involved in these shipbuilding feats: modern, modular construction, which allowed for the mass production of standardized parts. Historically, Japan attempted a similar approach once, striving to replicate the American model, but ultimately failed. The reasons for their failure lay in the fundamental limitations of their industrial infrastructure. They lacked the vast, sophisticated industrial base, the precise tools necessary for standardization, and the ability to produce parts interchangeably on a large scale. In contrast, every American destroyer escort was essentially identical to its sister ships. They shared the same engines, guns, radar systems, and even toilets. Their components could be swapped out seamlessly because everything was designed with interchangeability in mind. When a part needed replacing, say, after an encounter at Pearl Harbor, crew members could simply take a spare from San Francisco. It would fit perfectly because of the strict adherence to standardized manufacturing processes. Japanese ships, on the other hand, amounted to handcrafted masterpieces, each one unique, with meticulously made, custom-built parts that were visually beautiful but difficult to replace. If something broke in Japanese vessels, replacing it meant manufacturing a new part by hand, a process that could only be undertaken if the materials were available, if there was enough time, and if the crew was still alive, capable of carrying out the repairs. This stark contrast between American industrial efficiency and Japanese craftsmanship underscores the technological and logistical advantages that America held during the war. Fast forward to October of the year 1944, during the decisive Battle of Leyte Gulf, the last major naval engagement of the Pacific War. Japan committed everything they had. For carriers, 9 battleships, 20 cruisers, the entire fleet was drawn into this colossal confrontation. Amidst the chaos, destroyer escorts were deployed everywhere. Their roles ranged from screening the larger carriers against enemy aircraft, hunting down and destroying submarines that threatened the fleet, and laying smoke screens to obscure the battleships from enemy sight. A pivotal moment in this battle involved the USS Samuel B. Roberts, a destroyer escort constructed in just 142 days, charging headlong into the Japanese battle line. Meanwhile, the mighty battleship Yamato, which took over 4 years to build, was part of this intense confrontation. Although the Roberts was sunk in the clash, her aggressive attack inflicted damage so severe on the cruiser Chokai that the Japanese decided to scuttle her. The cost of these ships highlights the incredible disparity: theft of a $6 million destroyer escort in comparison to a $50 million cruiser. It was, in many ways, a good trade, because the smaller, less expensive vessel delayed the advanced Japanese fleet for 2 critical hours. During that brief window, measured in mere hours, another destroyer escort was rolling off the assembly line somewhere in America, ready to take its place in the ongoing fight. By November of 1944, Japan faced a bleak reality. They had lost approximately 80% of their destroyers. Meanwhile, the United States had ramped up its production exponentially, commissioning 400 destroyer escorts by that time. Furthermore, an additional 163 were already under construction, a scope of industrial output that Japan simply could not begin to comprehend or match. Admiral Ozawa, the Japanese naval commander, lamented this imbalance, famously describing fighting against America as akin to battling the ocean itself. He explained that if you destroyed one wave, 10 new ones surged forward, sink one ship, and 10 more appeared, kill one sailor, and another 10 were quickly trained to take his place. From his perspective, the Japanese Navy was not merely fighting a traditional fleet, but was embroiled in a relentless manufacturing environment, constantly producing new ships, sailors, and weapons to keep pace with America's unending industrial machine. In December of 1944, the USS Tabor, another destroyer escort, embarked on a perilous mission during Typhoon Cobra, one of the fiercest storms the Pacific had seen. On that day, the storm sank 3 larger destroyers, torpedoing their crews into the turbulent sea. Facing mountainous waves and howling winds, the USS Tabor searched tirelessly for 2 days, risking its own crew's safety to rescue battered sailors. Eventually, her efforts saved 41 men from the USS Hull and 14 from the USS Spence. The vessel's cost was approximately $6 million, and the training of those sailors, lasting around $5.5 million, highlighted the financial and human investments America was willing to make just to save individual lives. This calculation reflected the nation's capacity to allocate resources generously when it came to human safety, knowing that the cost of building ships could be justified by the value of the sailors they protected. By January of the following year, 1945, Japan launched Operation Ten-Go, an everything-or-nothing effort involving a series of suicidal submarine attacks against Allied shipping lines. With only 47 submarines remaining in its fleet, Japan faced a desperate situation. Meanwhile, the United States maintained a formidable fleet of 471 destroyer escorts actively engaged in the same waters. The ratio of American to Japanese vessels was staggering, more than 10-to-1, and this numerical superiority, combined with advanced sonar, radar, and weapon systems like Hedgehog anti-submarine devices, meant that Japanese submarines were detected long before they could attack. Armed with this technology, American destroyer escorts could target and destroy the enemy submarines before they even had the chance to strike a single ship or endanger their crews. Coming into February of 1945, the Battle of Inuitak Atoll unfolded with American destroyer escorts encircling the island. Their missions had evolved beyond traditional naval combat during wartime. These ships shelled enemy-held beaches to prevent Japanese landings, delivered crucial supplies and reinforcements, and evacuated wounded personnel from the battlefield. Their role was no longer solely combat-oriented. They had become versatile support vessels capable of performing a variety of critical tasks that often meant the difference between victory and defeat. This shift underscored the remarkable adaptability and resilience of the American naval forces, driven by a capacity for rapid industrial production, strategic flexibility, and unwavering commitment to defeating the enemy at every turn. They are trucks, but not ordinary trucks that you see on the roads. These are seagoing trucks, vessels specifically designed for maritime operations, yet fundamentally similar in their purpose to the trucks that transport goods over land. These ships are disposable, meant to be replaced with ease when their usefulness is exhausted, and they are produced in such enormous quantities that their supply seems virtually inexhaustible. For instance, during shore support missions, a single destroyer escort would unleash around 2,000 rounds of ammunition, more than an entire Japanese destroyer would typically carry during its entire operational lifespan. When this vessel runs out of ammunition and fuel, instead of lingering in port or wasting time, it simply heads over to a supply ship. The process is remarkably routine. It refuels and rearmed, akin to filling up a vehicle at a gas station, then sets out once more into the battle zone. In the final months of the Second World War, in March of 1945, the Japanese Navy launched its last major sortie. The battleship Yamato, accompanied by 9 escort vessels, faced a formidable fleet of 486 American ships near Okinawa, including a significant number of destroyer escorts, around 60 in total. Despite the overwhelming number of American ships, the Yamato was doomed from the start. It was ultimately sunk by American aircraft before it could even engage effectively in combat. Had it arrived at the battle, it would have faced an arsenal of 60 destroyer escorts armed with approximately 1,200 torpedoes, an almost inevitable mathematical certainty that such a heavily outnumbered Japanese surface unit would be overwhelmed. Fast forward to April of that year, when USS Whitehurst, a destroyer escort, deliberately rammed a Japanese submarine. This was no accident. It was a purposeful act of combat. The cost to the Whitehurst was about $6 million, an investment that had to be justified by its success in combat. Meanwhile, the Japanese submarine, costing around $15 million, was rendered useless, destroyed forever in a single collision. The Whitehurst recovered swiftly from its damages, within a mere 3 weeks, and was back in combat, actively hunting enemy submarines. The Japanese submarine, on the other hand, was lost irreparably, demonstrating that the United States could afford to prioritize aggressive defense strategies. trading paint and risk for the decisive elimination of enemy threats. On May 8th of 1945, Germany formally surrendered, marking the end of European hostilities. However, in American shipyards, there was no pause in production. The focus did not shift to celebration or relief. Instead, ships continued to roll off the assembly lines. Destroyer escorts numbered 543, 544, and 545 without interruption. The production machinery was solely dedicated to manufacturing at a relentless pace. Victory in Europe did not halt the work. The assembly line, built for wartime needs, was entirely indifferent to the broader political context. It was designed to weld, lift, install, and launch ships repeatedly, day after day, month after month, without consideration of the victory they had achieved. By June of 1945, Japan was left with only 11 destroyers remaining in its fleet. In stark contrast, the United States had commissioned a total of 550 destroyer escorts, along with an additional 500 other destroyers. This creates a ratio approaching 100 to 1, illustrating that the U.S. Navy was less an armada against the Japanese Navy and more an industrial juggernaut turning out ships at an unparalleled rate. It was industry against an archipelago, an entire nation's maritime defense built upon mass production rather than individual craftsmanship. Come July of 1945, the final destroyer escorts left the shipyards, a total of about 653 vessels. These ships were constructed in the same facilities where they had originally been assembled starting back in 1942 by shipbuilders who by now were already being retrained to produce consumer goods such as automobiles, refrigerators, and television sets. The transition was seamless. The entire production line shifted from wartime to peacetime manufacturing without missing a beat, exemplifying the extraordinary adaptability and efficiency of American industrial efforts. On August 15 of 1945, Japan formally surrendered, signing peace in Tokyo Bay. As the surrender documents were signed, thousands of destroyer escorts were anchored in meticulous rows, dozens, scores, and hundreds of them, across the harbor. Japanese officers came aboard the mighty USS Missouri to sign their country's capitulation, passing from vessel to vessel in neat procession. These ships, mass-produced symbols of victory, stretched out in countless rows, stood silent testimony to the industrial might that had defeated a formidable adversary. Admiral Yanai, who served as Japan's Navy minister, later reflected on the conflict and remarked, "We believed we were fighting artists against engineers. We were mistaken. In reality, we were fighting artists against a relentless assembly line." He noted that each American ship, although perhaps lacking in aesthetic beauty, being utilitarian, raw, and disposable, was produced in such staggering numbers that their total was beyond counting. Following the war, the calculation of the United States naval production was stark and revealing. A total of 563 destroyer escorts had been built at an average cost of approximately $6 million each. This meant a collective expenditure of roughly $3.4 billion. To put that in perspective, Japan's entire war budget for the year 1944 was approximately $2.8 billion. In other words, America had spent more money on disposable escort ships, ships designed for temporary use, than Japan had allocated for all of its wartime expenses combined. The full scale of America's industrial effort becomes even clearer when considering construction times. By 1945, the average time required to build a destroyer escort had been reduced to about 90 days, just 3 months from laying the keel to having a ship ready for combat. Meanwhile, Japanese destroyer construction still took at least 18 months per vessel, a process 6 times longer. The U.S. shipbuilding industry had harnessed rapid, efficient production methods, enabling workers, many of whom had only recently learned welding, to deliver ships at an astonishing pace. In 1952, Japan's most decorated destroyer commander, Captain Tamed Kahara, visited America. During his visit, he toured the shipyard on Mayor Island, where civilian ships were now being built in the same facilities that had once churned out wartime vessels. Curious about the recent history, he asked the supervisor to show him photographs from the wartime era. The images revealed rows of destroyer escorts under construction, rolling off assembly lines in a manner reminiscent of automobile factories. The process was so streamlined and continuous that it appeared almost automated. One ship launched every few days from all the yards combined, a testament to the efficiency of American wartime production, resembling nothing so much as an assembly line in a modern car factory. Heron nods slowly, and with that simple gesture, a profound understanding dawns upon him. It becomes clear now, the story is not just about ships or weapons, but about the unstoppable march of industrial efficiency and the stark realities of military power. Japan, determined and precise, focused on constructing ships with meticulous craftsmanship, while America embraced mass production to turn out war machines at an unprecedented scale. Japan dedicated itself to forging formidable vessels, creating detailed weapons with care, yet when it came to overall victory, America shifted into a different gear, mass-producing triumph by the thousands. The final destroyer escort, known as USS Minister, was decommissioned and scrapped in the year of 1973. This vessel had served for exactly 30 years, a vessel that had been built in a mere 3 months but was active for 3 decades, a testament to the efficiency and resilience of American wartime manufacturing. And yet, the economics of warship production, viewed from this perspective, seem almost grotesquely absurd. Today, only a single destroyer escort survives as a tangible relic of that era, a museum ship called USS Slater, nestled in Albany, New York. Constructed at Tampa Shipbuilding, she was assembled in 14 months, a period that seems remarkably brief when one considers the sheer size and complexity of such a vessel, from laying the keel to her official commissioning. Visitors often perceive her as something extraordinary, something historic and unique, perhaps a symbol of national pride or naval ingenuity. But that perception is, in fact, false. This ship is not one of a kind. She is merely a representative of a broad, mass-produced fleet. She is unit number 515 out of a total of 563 identical vessels. To the untrained eye, she appears distinct or special, but in reality, she is as generic as a Model T Ford, produced in staggering uniformity during wartime. That was precisely the intent behind her design and manufacture. There is a small placard positioned by her gangway that reads, USS Slater, Cannon-class destroyer escort, one of 563 mass-produced units. Visitors read these words and often take photographs, not of the ship itself, but of the sign, capturing the stark reality behind these vessels. These ships were mere units, interchangeable, designed for efficiency rather than uniqueness. In the year 2001, an elderly Japanese man visits the ship, a man aged 90, a former submarine commander who had participated in the attack on Pearl Harbor. As he touches the hull, welded steel, not riveted, he remarks in English that there was never any real chance for Japan against such overwhelming industrial might. And he is correct. From the moment the American shipyards looked at the task of building warships with a focus on speed and efficiency, Japan's Navy was doomed not by superior seamanship or tactical brilliance, but by the relentless force of mass production. While Japanese ships were meticulously crafted with skilled hands, the American approach emphasized assembly line mass production. Young workers, sometimes barely out of school, with welding torches in hand, welding seams with such consistency that they could not tell port from starboard, but could produce identical, perfect welds hour after hour, day after day, 6 days a week. Meanwhile, in American shipyards, Henry Kaiser's empire was shattering production records. Liberty ships rolled off assembly lines at a pace of just 4 days per vessel. Escort carriers, essential to control the seas, were built in a matter of weeks. The same philosophy applied broadly to every floating weapon, whether it was a cargo ship, a battleship, or a support vessel. By 1945, the United States had constructed over 2,710 Liberty ships, 50 escort carriers, and more than 563 destroyer escorts, a staggering output by any measure. In stark contrast, Japan's efforts were overshadowed by the stark power of industrial mass production, a fact made painfully evident on that day when the emperor's surrender broadcast marked the end of hostilities. Kazu Sakamaki, who had been the first Japanese prisoner of war captured at Pearl Harbor, closely observed this American industrial miracle from prison camps. After the war, Sakamaki channeled his understanding of manufacturing into a different realm, automobiles. He eventually became the president of Toyota in Brazil, applying the principles of mass production he had witnessed in the United States to the automotive industry, revolutionizing how cars were built in Brazil and beyond. He passed away in the year 1999, leaving behind a legacy built on the understanding that speed in construction meant everything. In his final interview, Sakamaki was asked what he had learned most from America. He replied without hesitation, "Speed. Not simply the speed of ships cutting through water, but the speed of their production, the rapidity with which these war machines could be conceived, built, and put into action." His insight was profound. Any nation capable of manufacturing warships with the efficiency and rapidity of producing ordinary automobiles could, in fact, produce anything. The true mistake, he argued, was the misconception that war was solely about warriors, about soldiers and sailors fighting hand-to-hand or with strategic finesse. Instead, he emphasized that modern warfare, especially in the era of mass production, was fundamentally about welders, mechanics, assembly line workers, ordinary laborers whose skill and speed determined the fate of nations. The era of thinking that victory belonged solely to the bravest or most tactically astute was over. It belonged instead to those who could mass produce and assemble at relentless speed.